Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by Sacramento legend Scott Gradin, currently athletic director at Pleasant Grove High School. Coach, thanks for joining us today.
So happy to be here. Thanks for having me. And there must be another definition of legend I'm not familiar with, but yeah, I appreciate the nice words.
Well, in the basketball community, when everybody knows who you are, that's what works for legendary in my mind. So anyway, can you take us through your background as a coach? How'd you get into it? What was the process like for you navigating and ending up in your first job? And then kind of steps from there, kind of give us the resume. And then at the end, obviously, how did you end up deciding to become an administrator?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. You know, my journey in basketball was kind of an unlikely, something you couldn't see as I was growing up. I was always the smallest guy. I was 16 when I was a senior in high school. You know, I was 120 pounds, 5'10". Love sports, loved basketball, but I just get pushed and shoved, and you know, I didn't have coaching and all that. So that's just something that I love to do. I ended up going to Chico State, and my best friend was on the basketball team there, and we just played basketball 24/7. I mean, it was in between classes, it was before classes, it was after classes, it was on the weekend. Best open gym on Saturdays, man. You lose a game, you might as well just go home. You're waiting 3 hours. It was fun, and I couldn't get enough. And at the time, Chico State was Division II, and the head coach there, as part of his salary, he had to teach classes. So I was in all those classes. Like I was undeclared, didn't know what I wanted to do. All I knew is that I love sports. That's all I knew. So anyway, I got in those classes and I worked hard and I put on some weight and I grew a little bit, and I said, I'm going to try out for the team next year. And I got to know there was a new coach. His name was Puck Smith. Prescott Smith came from Washington State. He was an assistant up in Pac-10, and he came down, and I was in all of his classes. I was in his philosophy class, his basketball class, and I talked to him about trying out, and I was at all the workouts. And he came to me one day and he says, hey, I really appreciate your approach, the way you approach the game physically, mentally. I need an assistant freshman coach, because at the time Chico State had a freshman team and Davis had a freshman team. It was like the only two schools that I knew of that were four-year schools that had freshman teams in and around our area. Ended up playing a lot of JCs, and I said, yeah, I just don't think he wanted to cut me, so he found a way around it. But it really started my career. So I was 21 years old. I was a junior in college, and I was an assistant college coach for the freshman team. The next year, he moved me up to the varsity assistant. I was also the van driver. I love that job. We had a big old luxury van. I cruised all over to all the games, drove all the guys. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, they don't tell you that when you're getting in at the levels that we started at, that part of your primary responsibility is driving the van.
It is. And you know, and you make $0 for doing it too. That's the best part about those early jobs. I then got the graduate assistant gig at Reno. Len Stevens was the coach. That's who Prescott Smith worked for when he was at Washington State. And so I had kind of an in and used it and became a graduate assistant there. After a year there, I got contacted by Santa Clara University head coach Carol Williams. He had heard good things about me and wanted to interview me. They had a part-time job open. And so I interviewed for that job and got that job. And that's really where I consider my coaching career to have started, working in that program with those people, the professionalism, the discipline, the mental approach, how you deal with people, not only on the team, but support staff, you know, in terms of office and secretaries and ADs. And they're just true professionals and the greatest influences in my life, without a doubt. And I spent a couple of years there. I was offered a head assistant coaching job at Northern Arizona University for the girls side. Charlie Turner, who's now at Arizona State. And I took it, and it was kind of, it was exciting. I was going to get married in June. I got the job in April, and I moved up there, and the AD flew me and my fiance to Flagstaff, wined us, dined us, made all these promises. You're going to have this contract and these perks, and my wife is going to have a scholarship, and she was in a master's program at Sac State. All your units are going to transfer. we'll get you into school of psychology, everything. I mean, it couldn't be any better. And then I got there, probably towards the end of April, and he'd come in, my AD would come in my office every week and say, well, you know about all the units. Well, we only can transfer 9. And then it was, well, you know, I said you're in the school of psychology. Well, she's going to have to apply, and there's 150 applying. They take 5, right? So all of a sudden, this job that was the perfect job was like, what am I doing, right? Like, this isn't a way to start a marriage. This isn't a way to start off
Definitely not
a relationship, even with the AD. Like, now I can't trust what the guy says. And so I bounced. I was out. So once I got married, because she was preparing to move to Northern Arizona and she didn't even apply for classes at Sac State, neither of us had a job, neither of us had a place to live, and she didn't have anywhere to go to school. And that's kind of how we started our relationship. So a little bit rough. I ended up just kind of, I knew so she got enrolled and said, let's just stay in Sacramento for a year. You get your master's and then we'll reevaluate. And so I was here. I just made contacts with all the coaches that I was recruiting. You know, when I was at Santa Clara, I get to have some good relationships with the high school coaches. And so I ended up talking to Jim Smirker. And then Jim said, hey, if I get you a long-term sub job, will you be my assistant? I'm like, yeah, that's great. Let's do it. Had a great time. Just loved it. Loved the level. I was so surprised at, you know, probably the mentality of the level, that the kids were able to absorb it. They wanted it. It was just a fun environment. And it was at that point, I sat down with my wife and I said, you know, in 5 years, I had 5 different coaching jobs, you know, and so you're working your way up this ladder. And then who knows if someone gets fired, if you have to go back a couple steps and then, you know, move, try to find your opportunities to move up in the industry. Decided that I liked high school. Let's just do this for a while. It's stable. You know, our family's close by. She had all these connections and, you know, she was going to be a marriage, family, and child psychologist, and she had all those connections. And so I applied for some high school jobs. Now, this was an unusual time in coaching where people actually applied for coaching jobs. You know, there were like 6 people, at least 6 people going for every job. And these are people that we know. Like, I walk into Rio Americano to interview and Mike Wall is in there, you know, waiting for the next interview. So they're really highly competitive. And I ended up, I applied for 3 jobs and I got the Rio Americano job. And it was just a great fit for me. It was the perfect place, the perfect time, and the perfect group of kids. We had a lot of success in 3 years. We won league and section championships. I had a great group. And then I went to Sheldon. And Sheldon was a brand new school. It was in my neighborhood. I wanted to challenge building my own program, starting my own traditions. You know, when I took over Rio had such a storied history especially with Al Manfredi and success he had. And he was still teaching there at the time. And he was such a great influence and support. Just loved Al Manfredi.
And did you follow Al directly?
No, Al's assistant took over for, it was 2 or 3 years.
Mhm.
And then I followed him after his stint there. So I got to Sheldon and it was interesting. You know, we're in the Delta League. So at that time, every school in the Delta League was in the top 10 in the city. And then we had only juniors. And I only had 2 kids who played basketball before. So for whatever reason, it seems like when a lot of schools open, people transfer to start. Yeah, it's a clean slate or it's in my neighborhood and I'm excited. Nobody wanted to go to Sheldon. Like, nobody wanted to go to Sheldon. So we had a rough start, but, you know, in 3 years we won league. And then the 4th year we backed it up with another league championship. And we went on and we've obviously had a lot of success there. And then it's about 12 years in and my son was in 6th grade. And, you know, this is the time where outside influences started to become prevalent in basketball. It was a lot of AAU. It was the parents' contacts and who they knew. And so you're trying to build a culture and have an impression on a young man's life. And there's so many influences that wasn't really happening anymore. So, you know, for me, it was a step back to look at the time and the sacrifice you put into something. And then what are you getting out of it? Like, I didn't feel like I was having an impact anymore in people's lives. And maybe that was true or false. And I don't know, but it's just the way it felt to me. So that's why I said, I want to spend my time and my energy with my son. So I did that and never looked back, didn't regret it. I always have people like, don't you wish you were back in coaching or you miss it? And And honestly, there's a lot of things I miss in coaching, but I used to love the grind. Just loved it. Like, I mean, even at Santa Clara, I was there at 6 in the morning. I'd leave at 9 at night. I was the first one there, last one to leave. Couldn't get enough. Didn't ever feel tired. Didn't ever feel worn out. And then it got to, by the end, it didn't take long to feel worn out. I remember like 2 years before I resigned, it was the end of December, and I'm like, God, when's the season going to be over, right? And then the next year, I felt that way at the beginning of December, and I'm like, this isn't right. I'm not excited to be here. I don't feel like I'm having an impact. So I left basketball, and left it in very good hands. The program was strong. I felt good about what we had done, the impression we had left on the people that had been there, and the state of the program was great in our community and in the school. And so I coached my son's teams until he got to be a freshman in high school, and he didn't want to play basketball anymore. And so then I just kind of ventured into country club sports and helped out at Sheldon. I feel like I'm teaching PE there. I should be doing something. And I wanted to do something. So I tried to help out the programs that got the least support, the least amount of interest. And we built pretty good programs in the golf and in tennis there. And then I just honestly, I'm going to call it a weak moment. When I took this job, I had some people talking to me about taking over. And well, also I was feeling a little bored, and I was looking at it. I go, okay, I got 10 years until I retire. Can I keep saying, okay, soccer teams 1 and 2, you're on field 1, 3 and 4, you're on field 2, and then just do that for the next 10 years? It just seemed a little bit boring to me. Like I spent my whole life helping people, and especially young people. And I figured I wanted a new challenge. So I took this job on, and I knew it was going to be challenging. Getting used to the hours was hard because I hadn't been in a grind mindset. And so the days felt really long, but it's feeling a little bit better now. I mean, we could still do 12 to 16-hour days. It's not every day, but there are stretches that are tough, and it doesn't feel super hard. So it's good. I feel like the program has changed and it's having an impact, and I feel positive about that. Coaching coaches has been a lot different than coaching kids, but it's just as as a former coach, we have so many experiences, and I put you in that innovator category as a coach. You weren't afraid to try stuff. And so we try stuff, and it works, and we're feeling good, and it doesn't work, and we're like, okay, let's retool, let's redo this. Like, it didn't stop us. It only, it only motivated us to do more. And so passing on those experiences. So when a coach comes to you with an idea and you go, yeah, you know what, I tried something like that, and this is how it worked out for me. Like, hey, you can do it if you want to do it. You do what feels right to you, but I can tell you from experience that this is how it turned out for me. And this is what we did after that happened, and this turned out really well. So again, it's your program. You go the way you want to go. I'll support you. And so I think that's been good for our coaches to bounce ideas off, and especially as an old guy like me who's kind of been there and tried and failed a lot. So that's been good.
Awesome. Super intriguing journey, and I'm trying to figure out where I want to go here. And my traditional path on these things based on your close there is going to shift. So what I'm going to do is reverse some of the things I usually ask, and we're going to go right into, as the athletic director, as a guy that's bounced around from your primary discipline in basketball to golf to tennis. But now you're coaching coaches. You're out there on the grounds watching teams. What would you say? I'm going to frame this 2 ways. Do what you want with it. Is the best thing that happens in your program, and this could be any sport coach. This can just be something you do top down, or it's stuff that you've seen that you've now taken and shared. Oh, I watched the tennis coach do this, and I went to the basketball coach and say, hey, you're missing the boat over here, right? In that case, or what is something that you have personally stolen or borrowed or encouraged somebody else to borrow that doesn't necessarily align with their current sport, right? Because as basketball coaches, it was like, how do I get better at basketball? Well, I need to go to these basketball clinics. And I think people miss the boat on, the cross-pollination of discipline. So I'll throw that out there. Take it where you want. I'm curious what you've learned being in this chair as you coach coaches, that has broadened your toolbox by watching these other people coach.
Yeah,
and we will cut that out when the bell's over. So when you know it's done, then go ahead.
All right. So that's a lot to take in, you know, and I thought about this job a lot before I took it. What I didn't want to be is a micromanager. I didn't want a top-down system. I feel like we're all doing the same things. It may look a little different from sport to sport, but the objectives are the same. And my big thing is I wanted to take the experiences I've had with my athletic directors, the ones I really appreciated. I wanted to be that kind of person. And most of all, I wanted to be the AD that I wanted to have, right? So how do you want to be treated? And that's kind of the way I went about this thing. And so our first athletic director at Sheldon's name was Bob Baker. And Bob was he was a great AD. You know, he was always there. He always supported you. He let you go and have your things, do it your way. And I appreciated that about him. So I really try to encourage my coaches to take ownership of their program. You know, it's not my program, it's your program. And so, and together we've kind of come up with some, you know, and the big thing is community with our coaches and community with our teams inside of our attendance area. And I think those things are different. And probably the best things that I've seen when I've been part of a good athletic department was that the coaches were connected. And however you want to say that, like at Sheldon, it was easier because we were almost all on-campus coaches. When they started that school, the principals, Paula Duncan, she wanted to make sure that her coaches were on campus. She knew that the impact that coaches would have on kids. And now, for example, I mean, I can't speak for Sheldon. I know it's similar, but we're 2,600 kids. We have 1,000 kids that participate in sports. That's a lot of people that have a chance to have some kind of positive influence in their life from an adult. And so on-campus coaching was easier at Sheldon for us to get to know each other, to buy in together. We hung out together. We shared ideas together. It was a kind of a, like I said, it was a community. And when I got here, coaches didn't even know who the other coach was. They could walk by each other and not even know, hey, that was the tennis coach, or that was the volleyball coach. And so my big thing was, let's get together. Let's have an adult beverage. Let's eat some food. And let's talk. And so that's what we did. And so building the program was, let's get these coaches to know each other, and let's develop a support system within the coaching staff so that I'm not the only one who's supporting these coaches. And I think that's important. The other AD before me, he was everything. He kind of burned himself out. Bruce Belden, guy, he worked tirelessly. And he just worked so hard at this job, put so many hours in and built so much. But he was doing it all by himself. And that's one thing I knew I couldn't do. I'm not going to last if I do everything by myself. So developing a community and a support, I think is really important for our campus. And the other thing I think is a little different at Pleasant Grove, and I don't know how many schools you know that are like this, but our school it's an affluent school, and it's a very high academic school, highest test scores in Sac County, and comparable, a distinguished California school. So a lot of people want to go to school here. We are impacted. So what that means is, if you don't live in our attendance area, and not just that, let's say that, Justin, you and your family move in across the street, literally across the street, and you come in to enroll here, they're going to bounce you over to Sheldon or Elk Grove High School because we're full. And it doesn't matter if your name is Bagley, like Marvin Bagley's little brother. The Bagleys moved into our attendance area. They came to register school, and they sent them to Sheldon. 6'7" All-American juniors going to Sheldon High School, and they live at Pleasant Grove. It didn't matter. Like, we're full. So I always tell our coaches, you have the worst coaching job in the section. We can only lose players. We can't get players. And in a day and age in which the transfer is so prominent, it's like 8th grade going to high school is like the new senior going to college. It's like, let's evaluate all the programs. Let's see where we want to go. Let's look at the coaches. And academics isn't as big of a deal as athletics are. And so whenever we lose a kid, that means we're now going to be playing with second string and third string individuals. So it's a tough situation to coach in. for sure. And so developing our community that way has been very important. So not only the coaches knowing the coaches, but getting the teams and the programs connected back to the community.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was at Sheldon, I had some friends whose kids lived in our attendance area, and they would call me and say, "Hey, I don't know what you're doing with these kids, but all they do is they wear Husky stuff. They just can't wait to be Huskies."
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that's what we want. That's what we intended to have happen with the basketball program, with our camps and our clinics, and we're giving them gear and basketballs. And there was nothing going on here. I mean, our middle school is attached to our high school, and there's no interaction. There's no back and forth. The AD doesn't even. I mean, there's no. I have reached out to her, and we've had coffee, and I'm trying to figure out, like, how do we work together to build this, because there's this real standoff thing, and I think it's hurt our attendance. And so once we get kids in this community connected, and they're coming to our games and they're wearing our gear and they can't wait to be Eagles, then I really feel like that's the impact that I wanted to have coming here. Is just the building the community with coaches, the building the community within our attendance area. That's kind of what I've done. And I've looked around, and it's just different. Like, if you don't have that impacted mentality, you can be a little different in terms of how you build your athletic department as an athletic director, because you're not as worried about kids. I mean, you get a good coach and they run a good program, and kids want to go, right? We all know that. I mean, we've seen it all over California. For me, I get a good coach, we build a good program, we got to make sure that our kids stay. And this school has had tremendous success before we became impacted. But even within our community, state championship in basketball, state appearances in girls basketball, section championship in football. They beat Folsom for football. I mean, and we've had a lot of success, but that can't happen unless we keep our kids here. This community is good enough to support athletics if our kids stay home. Now, we know that's not going to happen 100%,
Right?
but it needs to happen 90%, right? I mean, we need to keep our kids here. And to me, that's what my goal is. That's what I'm trying to do with this program. And as I look around and I see other programs, there's not a lot of relevancy because we're so unique in that way. So it's just going back to the basketball model and trying to make it a bigger model. Like when I was at Sheldon, the camps, the clinics, the connection, that was huge. And we got people that not only were excited about going, but people who wanted to from outside our area join our basketball program. Right. So it's getting that kind of mentality and making it bigger. Instead of it's just basketball, it's 18 different sports. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, I think that's huge, especially as the administrator seeing that, and you're almost grassroots building your community back. And I think often people land in jobs, both as coaches and athletic directors, and it's like, well, boo-hoo, this is what we're dealing with. And it's like, you can change that. You can get out, to your point, and build community. And even if you're not very good, like, be relevant in younger kids' lives by deploying the high school kids as mentors. And then all of a sudden, it's, to your point, they're wearing the stuff and they want to go there because that's all they've ever known. And I don't think people think of it that way. And that's a great nugget for them to take with them. And it's like, you can change the long term. It's just not going to be overnight. You actually have to invest, K through 8 of making them feel like they're part of the group. And especially the way that your district is set up, to your point, the middle school is attached, right? And I'm sure there's only a couple of elementary schools that feed it. It's like, you can put an umbrella over that and really start building that up. And I guess, what have you seen work and what have you seen not work that you would offer out there for the universe in regards to doing that within the spirit of the guidelines, to build that community versus just chasing? That's the bell.
That's the Get Your Butt to Class song.
That's hilarious.
So that lets the kids know there's less than a minute until the bell rings, because that was our 10-minute break. And so the kids like to hang out a little longer than 10 minutes. So that lets them know, like, hey, you're going to be tardy, get to class.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And it plays for a minute? No. Okay. So anyway,
then there's going to be a bell, and then there's going to be a bell here in like a few seconds.
That's fine. We'll let the bell rip through. That wasn't too bad. What have you seen work and what have you seen not work in regards to, there it is. So I'll circle back. Within the spirit of the rules in regards to making sure you're focusing on the student athlete and the whole person in your whole community versus making it about, let me go out here and get the best basketball players, right? What have you seen work and not work in your experience?
I'm not sure about not work. But I can tell you what has had some success, and it's getting your players in front of the young players. So how do you do that? How do I get my high school varsity team in front of elementary school and junior high kids? And so that's the challenge. And so what's the conduit? Oh, well, is it camps? Is it clinics? And an answer is yes, it is. And it's having some kind of youth program where you have an outreach into the community, and so that these players, because I remember at Sheldon we had camps and the kids coached the teams. We didn't coach the teams, we ran the camps, and I'm sure you've seen the model or you've done it yourself or whatever. And so the rule was, if they wore their jersey, they got into the game free. You know, hopefully they brought their parents, and then we got some paying people, you know, got one free and a couple paid. But then they got to sit behind the bench and be the water boy for their coach, right? So we had all these little guys behind the bench. And they just loved it. They ate it up. And even our high school players, they loved the attention. You know, it was great for them to have these kids that, you know, and they're mentoring these kids, you know, in whatever certain way. And they have so much fun, not only coaching against each other, but, you know, uniting these groups and the spirit. And, you know, and I love my coach, and here coach, and they're trying to get him water, you know, and he's trying to get into the game. And it was just really, it was a lot of fun. And again, it kind of fosters that community spirit, because there's some communities that don't have a community spirit. They're transient by nature, just for whatever reason of the housing in the area or whatever. It's hard for them to have that kind of community, but we're not like that. I mean, it's likely for us that a young family moves into our attendance area and they're going to be here for 12 to 15 years. It's just kind of the way that the boundaries are and the way those communities are constructed. And so that's a hard part. The other hard part for us is that we have the largest attendance boundary, I believe they said in the state. Now, that's a little bit misleading because a lot of it is open country. So we have Sacramento proper, right? And so we're actually in Elk Grove. And so we have the surrounding Elk Grove communities. You know, there's a lot of, we're a suburb. There's a lot of track housing areas around here. And it's over by Wild Hog Golf Course is close by. There's a community there, and, you know, several elementary schools. But then we go all the way into Rancho Cordova. So that's 20 minutes away. So it's called Anatolia. That section of Rancho Cordova is part of Pleasant Grove High School. Then you go into Rancho Marietta. That's another 25 minutes away. And that's 20 minutes away from Rancho Cordova. And you have that community. Then you have Wilton. Well, that's 20 minutes away. And that's 20 minutes away from Rancho Marietta and from Rancho Cordova. So you have all these, you have different communities within the community, which makes it even more challenging, is how do you get all these people to feel connected, you know, to one thing and to one school when, you know, they can't walk to school, you know, like traditional sense, like, you know, maybe kids at El Camino did when you were at El Camino, or when I was at Rio, or even at Sheldon, and they just live down the street. So we have some of that. We have kids that live down the street, but we have a lot of kids that don't. And so that's, you know, COVID really set us back a year. No more than that. I really almost consider this is my 4th year. I almost consider it my 2nd year. Just because I'm starting to do things now that I'd planned to do. My 1st year, I just wanted to do everything the way the old AD did it, and just get the staff to know each other. That was my goal. I just said, before I can make any changes, I want to see what's working, what's not working, you know, how it impacts other people and the programs, the community. So then I had a plan for year 2, but then got shut down, right? We're all shut down, and I didn't even get to finish year 1. I mean, the spring season got shut down. So all I did was fall, winter. I didn't even have a full year until last year. Last year wasn't totally open either. So this is kind of the first year that we've been able to, or this is my 2nd year where we've had sports year round. So I feel like we're a little bit behind on year 4, but it's kind of really year 2. And so what I really wanted to do was have this summer, the year 2 summer, be every program have a camp or clinic, you know, and have it be free. Like, We'll just make it a free clinic. Let's get people involved. Let's get some sponsors. Let's get PG gear in their hand. Let's, Eagle Pride, whatever, Eagle Strong, whatever, right? Tennis, golf, just so that we can start creating connections. And I think that's kind of the thing. And I, like you said, what hasn't worked, I don't know that so much. And maybe there's just,
I don't even think you need to go down that rabbit hole, because you're given enough for people to take away, and it's low hanging fruit. And it's like, just try it, see what happens. But I'm gonna pivot here, and I'm gonna ask, because I'm not gonna make us go back in the Wayback Machine to figure out, what it was when, you had great preparation, you worked for some really good people, and then, you get your first head job. And I usually ask, what is it that you realized right away you needed to figure out? Which you can answer, but really I want to know about that in the AD role. And you can't talk about COVID, because we all had to figure that one out. Nobody could have prepared us for that. But I do want to know, to your point, it's like you took this job in a weak moment, tongue in cheek. Yeah. But even with all your preparation, what's the thing that all of a sudden you were like, okay, that is not what I had planned for, besides COVID?
Well, I have people ask me, go, boy, don't you just love your job? And I'm like, you know what? This is a hard job to love. And I'm going to say that because you don't control much, right? I mean, stuff just happens. And of that stuff, if you wanted to make like a pie chart of positive versus negative, it's 75% negative. I mean, you rarely get a parent coming in and saying, God, you guys do such a great job. I can see what you're doing. Instead is, coach is yelling at my kid. He's bullying. She's verbally abusing. There's, and so then you've got to become this investigator, and Justin, and I'm sure you can, as athletic director and a coach, I think you get this, right? So we spend time and we build community within our coaches. I mean, these are relationships that I'm connected into also. So then you have a person. And so people like to use this, the cancel culture language, bullying and all that. That's their new way of saying my kid's not playing enough, or I don't like their role on the team. So let's find some, because they know we won't meet on that, right? Like, go talk to the coach. It's very laid out, but they got to get in front of you somehow and complain about something because they're not happy about the role that their child has on the team. And I'm going to say it's 90%. It could be more, it could be higher than 90%, right? Of the problems. And so I wasn't really prepared for that. The amount of negativity and sometimes how it makes me feel. There's some couple weeks where I'm just like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm not built for this anymore, right? I'm an old man. Like, take it easy on me. But also having those connections with the coaches also helps you pull through that too, because we're all in this together. But it's hard to get a complaint about a coach. Like, Justin, you're my basketball coach, and someone comes in and starts complaining about, the way you're talking to the kids, and he's using language and blah, 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 and I got you back, man. I'm thinking, this is Justin, man. This is my guy. I know he's doing a good job. I know what he's doing. And and so, it's how do you approach that has been a challenge. How do you make parents feel like they're being heard? And at the same time, making coaches know they feel supported. I'd say it's been challenging. I think we've had some luck with that. I'm gonna call it luck, because but it's not easy. And fortunately, I have really good coaches. They're really good people, and we work together well. And I think that's I could come to any of the coaches and say, hey, let's talk about this. This has come up. Let's start problem solving, right? Like, how we can get through this, and we do that, and it's been really good for me. But again, it's the negativity can be overwhelming sometimes, because people they like to complain. It's a different. I remember sitting at Rio Americano gym, and you're diagramming how to backpick the free throw shooter, right? And those are good days. That's kids came in, they worked hard, parents supported you, they understood discipline. And nowadays it's, discipline it's a dirty word. And if you try to do it, then if the parent doesn't agree, then there's a complaint going to be filed. And so it's tough time, but
let's talk about your strategy here then. I'm calling you coach, and it's like, hey, this is so and so, and I want to talk about my kid, but I don't want them to know that I'm calling. What's your take on that, and how do you navigate that situation?
Well, I'm going to ask them, so what's going on is what I would say, and then they start getting into into whatever they're trying to say. Now, what I feel like my job is, and then I'll say, have you talked to the coach about this? Well, no, I'm scared to talk to the coach. And I'll say, well, and that's been kind of the hard part, especially with our population, and you're probably even similar,
Mhm.
is that sometimes they'll go right to the superintendent if they don't, they just skip all the steps, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
getting them to follow the chain of command. So the chain of command is talk to the coach,
Mhm.
you know, if that's a JV coach and you don't like it, then you talk to the varsity coach. And if you still are not satisfied, then you come talk to me and then we'll have meetings. So there's a chain of command.
Yep.
Sometimes when they start with me, and I will tell them that, that's not the chain of command. Like, I'm happy to listen to you, but I'm going to send you back to the coach.
Mhm.
And I'll call the coach and I'll say, hey, heads up, so-and-so is coming. And this is what they're going to talk about, what's been going on. And so then we have a discussion about it.
Mhm.
And we talk about it. And I'm telling you, 9 times out of 10, that solves the problem. Like, just the communication between the coach and the parent. Because like I said, I have good coaches. They're good
Mhm.
people.
Mhm. Well, even before that, it's like, has your kid talked to the coach?
Yeah.
No, I don't want. So let's start
Yeah.
there, right? And
Yeah.
then you get to that next level, and both of those solve 90% of the problems.
Correct. Yeah, it is. You're right. Has your son or daughter spoken to the coach, right? And well, then the key word these days is retaliation, right? Well, we don't want any retaliation. Well, retaliation. Well, I want this to be anonymous because we don't want retaliation. And I don't understand that mentality. Where did that come in? Especially at this high school when I've been here and I know what's going on, and there hasn't been even one example of retaliation.
Right.
How they can jump there right away, and maybe that's just their avoidance mechanism, where they don't have to talk to the coach because they want to just talk to you or they want to talk to the principal. But anyway, I kind of see me as the defense between me and the principal, because that's a crazy job, man. I
Yeah,
wouldn't want
that
that job.
that one's even tougher than ours.
Oh,
So
geez.
I think that you brought up an interesting thing, because that's something that you hope isn't the case, where people feel that way, and you do everything you can from a community building standpoint, but people are still going to feel that way, and even us as adults, in regards to trying to have some conversations that may be uncomfortable, it's a lot of times it's past history and experiences that they have had that have nothing to do with you or their coach, that leads them to feel that way. And my
Correct.
struggle with it is, I can never get you past that if you're not willing to talk to me, to build a relationship where it can be strong enough to survive the burden of the truth. And it's like, I can't get you past your past trauma if you don't let me in. Right. And so that's the struggle that I have. And I don't know how we can put this out there for parents and for coaches, but the sooner you can build a working relationship with the people that have real influence on your children, the better it is for everyone, because you're working in partnership versus in conflict. And I don't know if you have any tools for that, but I think that is the perennial struggle for us as educators.
Yeah, I don't know about tools. Again, it's just kind of like teaching in a classroom. It's about relationships now,
Mhm.
how you want to build them. And some coaches are better at it than others. Some are really into their boundaries, and
Mhm.
I feel like it gets convoluted when you start having relationships with parents that are more than just professional, like
Mhm.
just being friendly and saying hi. And um, so, a lot of it's what's the coach comfortable with too,
Mhm.
and I didn't ever have a problem with that. I'd rather have them come to me than come to my athletic director. And
Mhm.
I felt like,
Mhm.
hey, when I was at Sheldon, that was definitely the case. They didn't have any problem coming to me. And
Yep.
sometimes we agreed to disagree, but we had to talk. We talked it out
Mhm.
and kind of solved the problem. But it's different now. It's just the mentality. The parenting is different.
Mhm.
It's just a different situation for sure.
All right, let me ask this, and we'll wrap up. We've been on for a while. This is something I always ask, and I'm curious, given your experience and how you said something earlier when you were talking about innovation. And, I think most of us in coaching and athletics are wired to try to figure out, is there a better way? right? And so we're always asking those questions for the most part and challenging our own mindsets and how do we grow. And so I'm curious, what is something that you have most recently changed your mind on? Now, I used to be over here and now I'm over here, and here's why. And it doesn't have to be about sports, just in general as a growth mindset question. How are we constantly reevaluating our thinking?
Well, I think that I've been lucky to be around good people, right? And I think I've always approached things with a growth mindset. It's just kind of an openness to listening and knowing that, there was this coach at Santa Clara. His name was Larry Hauser. May rest in peace. Great guy, hell of a coach, lived a tough life, but I learned so much from him. And one of the things that he used to talk about, right? He'd always, I'd sit in his car and we'd be going somewhere to scout or recruit, and he'd go, "Hey, it's not about who's right, it's about what's right." Right. And so just being able to take yourself away from evaluating things based on how they impact you, how they impact your program. It's a growth mindset. I mean, I sat down with my coaches, my basketball coaches every year, and we had an evaluation, like, where are we? Where do we want to be? Where are we weak? How are we going to get better? And then, and like, I remember, like I told you, we would sit down in the gym at Rio Americano at our tournament, and you and I would talk basketball for a half an hour. I remember one time, I think you had one of your kids in the car, and we were sitting in your car, and it was raining, and we were just Xing and Oing and diagramming and talking basketball. And I just think being open-minded to doing different things and trying different things. I think it's important to know who you are and where you're strong and what can work for you, because something that may work for you, Justin, may not work for me. I don't have the personality. I don't have the way to make that happen, but just listening to it and being able to evaluate it. And I think that's kind of the big thing, is just not to be so ingrained into one way. And it's hard when you've had success, just like, I'm going to do this every way. I have a funny story about that. I had an assistant coach one time. He'll be nameless. He was a freshman coach at Sheldon, and he had a good group, and he won the league one year. So he came back the next year, and they're 0-7, and he is angry, and he has his practice plans in his hands. He's slapping me. He goes, "It's the same practice plans as last year. It's the same progress, the same days. It's their fault." Which I thought was interesting, right? Like, he was convinced that because they won doing things a certain way, that was the way, right? There was no growth mindset. There was no introspection. There was nothing to that. And I think that's, no matter who you are, what you do to be successful, you're going to have to be able to step out of your box and be introspective and listen to others and ask a lot of questions. Ask people, what are they doing? And it doesn't matter if, I'm a varsity coach and you're a middle school coach, and pick your brain. What are you doing? How are you approaching things? How do you teach things? And eventually the conversation will flip where they're asking you a lot of questions. But I mean, just being open to hearing something, and you might hear something that works for you, or you might hear something that you definitely don't want to do, right? Like, I mean, I've had that experience too, where when I was young, I worked for a lot of coaches, and there was an experience with a coach, and I thought this was a great experience because I know what I don't want to do, right? I know I don't want to do that. And so that was good too. So I just think having a growth mindset and some introspection, and then having people that you can talk to honestly about how you're feeling or about what you need. And sometimes they have advice, or they know somebody that you can talk to that has advice. So that's always worked well for me, and I just, humility, knowing that, I think a lot of our success, we had great kids. Like, you could have had the same success the kids I had. I mean, I don't feel like I was that special in terms of the success we had versus what I had to work with, and maybe that's underselling it or whatever, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the experience. It was challenging for me. It was a great experience, helping those kids grow and be young men. And I loved it all. But I think that growth mindset and introspection is important.
Well, I think I'm going to wrap with this because I think it's very relevant to your story of, I'm doing the same thing. Well, any of us that have children, one or multiple, or any of us that have siblings or parents or relationship, should be very aware that they're all very different, and they all probably learn differently. And so it's great that you're doing it the same way, but at the same time, they might not learn the same way. Like one of my kids is super literal, one's conceptual, one's kind of in the middle. And so I'm trying to figure out what buttons to push, which, you know, 25 years ago would have been like, yo, figure this out. I'm teaching them the same way. But it's like that awareness of, hey, what's the end game here, right? Is to help people reach whatever success they can. And as the most mature human in the room, in theory, at least age-wise, you should be able to adapt more than them.
Correct. Correct.
So I think that's a great way to wrap up, Coach. Thanks for taking the time today. Excited to finally get this done.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great what you do to help coaches grow. I feel like those opportunities are fewer and far between than they were when I was younger and coming up through it. There was so much support and clinics, and they were also, you know, just even the coaches roundtables getting together after games or after summer league and just Xing and Oing. And that was really a special time, special memories for me doing all that. So thank you for taking the time to be part of people's learning experience.